Welcome to my lonely podcast. So, Certain Magical Index. If you know anything about me, or if you've ever seen my main channel, or if you've ever just looked at the profile picture of this very channel that you're on right now, which is no one, you could probably tell that I like the Toaru series a lot. The Toaru series is a lot of things. It's a certain magical index, a certain scientific railgun, scientific accelerator, dark matter, Astro Buddy, the future Shokuho manga. It's a lot of things. And it has really been my obsession ever since I got into the series around, I believe, 2018, when Index 3 first started airing. And that's how I pretty much got into the series. It was not because of Index 3 directly, but I remember I saw that it was airing at the time, and it was one of those series I had always wanted to get into just because I guess I just liked the way it looked. I remember really liking the promotional art for the first season of Railgun, and I just looked at it and I thought it was something that I would probably enjoy. I was right. And even though I had seen a few episodes of Index before, I had not really thought too much about it, other than it was just something always on my bucket list. Little did I know it would become one of my favorite series, and if you look at my main channel, it's almost the theme of that. It pretty much is the theme of that channel. I dedicated basically like a whole entire month to just uploading Toaru-related covers and videos and stuff. Usually in these videos on the Emerald channel, what I do is I talk about my experience and some of my observations of series that I really like. I tend to enjoy the things most that I don't feel like a lot of people talk about. My last video I did was about the Drakengard series, which almost no one has played, and it's a personal favorite of mine. And I would say I feel very similar about the Toaru series. I would say it's a series that very few people have actually seen or read, and even less people actually kind of like, because the Toaru series is really controversial. Now, I won't say that Toaru's controversial reputation isn't particularly deserved or not deserved, but I just wanted to discuss what it is about the Toaru series. Specifically, today I'm only going to be talking about Index. Railgun is going to get its own video, and I'm going to make a separate video just for Kuriko Shirai, because she's my second favorite character of all time. But today, I'm going to specifically talk about a certain magical index and why I love it so much, why it fascinates me more than the vast majority of anime and really fiction that I've consumed. Now, there will be some spoilers, but I'm more so going at this video as to defend the series a little bit more and discuss the greatest aspects of the series. So I kind of have to talk about the show itself in order to get some points across. But first, I want to recognize why Index is even controversial in the first place, before I get into the nitty-gritty. So the biggest reason above all else that people who are fans of Toaru, or specifically Index in this case, that still trash on the series is mostly, I would say, because of the anime adaptation. Now, I have not read all of the light novels. I've actually only read Index 3 material from 14, and I've yet to finish Volume 18. So the worst example of the anime adaptation is definitely Season 3. You could see this without ever having experienced the series at all, because if you were to look at the wiki and see how many episodes the first arc is, the first volume of Index was animated into 5 episodes. Okay, now volumes 17 and 18, which is the British royal family arc, which I'm going to talk about a lot probably in this video, is 2 books, and it had in total 5 episodes. I recently rewatched this arc after having read the majority of it, and I could say it was a lot more disappointing the second time I watched it before I had read the novels. But outside of the anime adaptation, Toaru is kind of known for a certain level of trashiness, I would say. There's a lot of, I guess, lolly sexualization people don't like. There's some questionable writing here and there. There's some pretty stupid fan service at times. At the end of the day, though, these things don't particularly bother me that much, and they don't take away from what I think makes the series fascinating. Anyways, if you asked me to describe a certain magical index, I would describe it as one of the most ambitious and expansive sci-fi anime to probably ever exist. Its world is gigantic, its cast is gigantic, and it explores an absurd amount of ideas that may be political, that may be religious, that may be scientific, that may be moral, and maybe even historical. Its power and ranking system is legitimately extremely underappreciated and is actually so much more interesting the deeper you dive into it than you may think on the surface. And on top of all of this, the series has an absurd amount of spin-offs. We're talking about spin-off light novels, manga, anime, and the way everything is interconnected, I think, is wonderfully done. First of all, I want to talk about the interconnectivity of this series. So, A Certain Magical Index is the main series. Most people would know that. The biggest spin-off that everyone is familiar with, and a lot of people like more, including myself, not by much though, is A Certain Scientific Railgun. And then some of the smaller spin-offs are Certain Scientific Accelerator, Astral Buddy, Dark Matter. There is a future manga coming out potentially this year with Shokuho Misaki as the protagonist. And there is even a spin-off where Accelerator is an idol. The typical formula is that Index progresses the main story, and then spin-offs such as Certain Scientific Railgun and Certain Scientific Accelerator go more in depth to those characters and their perspectives during different arcs. The best example is in season 2 of A Certain Scientific Railgun, you get a much more detailed and, in my opinion, superior retelling to the Sisters arc in the first season of Index. But that's not exactly what I'm here to talk about today. I'm going to talk about that in a separate video. But the reason I mention this is because this is one of the big things that I really love about this series, is the interconnectivity of it all. If there's any character in Index that you may have thought was not fleshed out enough, there's a decent chance that their character was fleshed out in one of these spin-offs. The best example of this is, without a shadow of a doubt, Frenda. Spoiler for Frenda as a character, so leave if you don't hear it. But Frenda only appears in Index in season 3. And if you were to only watch Index, this death wouldn't particularly mean much to you. But if you were to watch Railgun seasons 2 and 3, or S and T, I guess I should say, you would see Frenda's encounter with Mikoto and an entire arc that she had with Saten. I think this is what's important for getting invested into not only Index, but Toaru as a whole. Toaru is a series that I would say requires a decent amount of effort to really get the full experience. There is a lot that you have to watch or read. And some spin-offs are quite different from others. I would say Railgun and Astral Buddy are very, very different than Index. But now let me talk about just Index, not the spin-offs, just Index and why I love it. Index, by far, has my favorite setting and my favorite world in all of anime. I don't think anything comes particularly close. Not only is Academy City vastly interesting on its own, but this series constantly involves foreign countries. Excluding Academy City, the main character Toma has gone to Italy, France, Russia, and Britain, up to where the anime is at least. But before I get too deep into that, I want to talk about Academy City and why it is specifically my favorite setting in anime. So Academy City is this extremely technologically advanced city with around like 2 million people, and 80% of the population there are students, which is why it's called Academy City. In Academy City, they developed what is called the Esper program. And essentially, before this program was invented, being able to achieve an ability on your own was not particularly possible. There were about, I want to say 50 people in the world before this program that were just naturally born with abilities. So Academy City developed this curriculum that could help children, specifically more so, develop an ability. And when you get into a little bit of the backstory of this, which I think the anime actually got to cut out, but it's actually extremely interesting. This program was set up and kind of, in a way, manipulated parents to send their children off to this program, thus allowing these kids to develop an ability and hone their skills to become as powerful and reach as high as a level as possible. Just hearing this alone, you can probably imagine where this goes. When you have numerous scientists and research facilities now with extreme influence over a city of millions of kids that have supernatural abilities, on top of already being so technologically advanced that I think it's literally stated they're about 20 years ahead technologically in comparison to the rest of the world. Politically speaking, this gives Academy City so much power in the world that even though their population is only about like 2 million in comparison to something like the United States having 300 million, Academy City is still considered one of the biggest threats, if not the biggest threat to the world because of their technology and because of their resources, aka the espers, which is the term used to describe these children that have developed abilities. Because Academy City is such a threat to the world, that's why it's constantly facing conflicts with other countries. In addition to the political nature, there's also the pretty blatant theme of science versus magic/religion. Now, just to clarify, if you know absolutely nothing about Index, but basically, Academy City embodies the side of science and technological advancements, while the majority of the rest of the world is dominated by religion. And within these churches, there is a secret magic society. Why is it secret? I don't actually really even know why it's considered. It's kind of not secret, but it also is secret. Anyone could find out about this stuff, but it's not something that's actually publicly addressed by any government. Anyways, let me talk a little bit about Academy City and its conflicts/cooperations with the church. Not only is Academy City feared as a political force, but they're also feared as an antithesis to faith. This is seen through a major conflict that they secretly have with the Roman Catholic Church. Not only does the Roman Catholic Church attempt to basically destroy Academy City, but we also see how this affects the populace. If you see in the first arc of Index 3, there are actually severe riots. Now, these people were technically being manipulated, but that doesn't change the fact that there is a large portion of people out in the world outside of Academy City that absolutely abhor Academy City for its endangering influence towards the church. But it goes even further than just this. There are more churches that don't exactly feel this way. We have the Amakasa Church, which I believe was a Far Eastern church that moved actually to Great Britain. This is a church that doesn't inherently hate Academy City and actually supports Toma, the protagonist, who views himself as technically being in the middle between both sides. Also to mention, he's also worked with the Church of England. What I love about the Church of England, and yes, I know this is going all over the place. It's such a huge series with so many layers going on. But what I love about the Church of England is that there are sectors kind of within the Church of England. There is the Zeroth sector, which is Necessarius, the Church of Necessary Evil, that you can put two and two together, commits acts that they view as being necessarily evil. Now, if you've seen even the first little bit of Index, you would know this is where Style and Kanzaki come from, and also Laura Stewart, who I believe is the bishop of the Church of England. Also, side note, I remember reading this little interlude, interlude about the Pope. It was talking from the perspective of the Pope, who was actually very jealous of Laura Stewart and her very close, friendly relationship that she held with other members of the church and followers of the faith. One point that I'm trying to get across here is just how expansive Index is. There are many layers to everything in the world, and there's more than just, it's more than just black and white. It's not this side good, this side bad. It's very easy to look from the other side's perspective and understand why they feel the way they do. And it leads to, there's a lot of paranoia on both sides that one is trying to get rid of the other, that there's this sort of power struggle, I would say. I will briefly note that as a Christian myself, you're not going to find the most accurate portrayals of churches, that's for sure. But I think it's still an interesting contrast nevertheless. Now, before I move on to the next sort of subject point, I really desperately want to talk about the British royal family arc, because I think this arc perfectly encaptures the wonderful world building of Index. In the British royal family arc, which I always call the royal family faction arc, I don't know why, I just do. Basically, Index is called to Great Britain, and Toma, Toma and Index were like put to sleep with like tear gas or whatever by Tsuchi Mikado, which is kind of funny, and they were dragged there. But Toma and Index, nevertheless, travel to Great Britain, which is where Index is originally from. As they get there, they meet up with Kanzaki, who is a saint, and they meet the Queen of England and the three princesses, and they discuss a bit of a turmoil that has happened between Great Britain and France, as the Eurotunnel had actually just exploded. They were uncertain as to why, and they were discussing solutions. Now, what I love about this arc is really Carissa, one of the three princesses. So the three princesses each represent something different. So you have the oldest, who represents knowledge. You have Carissa, the middle child, who represents war and strength. And then you have the youngest, who represents virtue. So what happens in this arc, and this is a spoiler for the arc, this is in Index 3, by the way, if you're wondering. It is volumes 17 and 18. Carissa, the second princess, who represents war and strength, believes that England has pretty much screwed itself in the context of the rest of the world. So England is essentially powerless and hasn't really chosen too deeply on either side of science nor magic. And this is actually kind of seen with the Church of England, because the Church of England has actually kind of worked with Toma before. They don't necessarily oppose science. So basically, England as a whole is kind of in the middle of both science and magic. This leads Carissa, the second princess, to believe that there's no way out for England, and that the conflict between the magic and science sides is only going to get much worse. And so England must become a world power on the same level as the United States and on the same level as Academy City if they want to have any chance at succeeding and maintaining influence as a country. So how does she do this? She literally secretly starts a coup d'etat. As someone who embodies the ideas of war and strength, she gains pretty much the entirety of the influence of the military itself. She convinces that if the military works for her side, that she will turn Great Britain into a powerful country that can handle itself just like Academy City can. So she attempts to assassinate her mother, which is the Queen of England, and both of her sisters. And she plans to start a war against France. I love how ambitious this arc was. In my opinion, the royal family faction arc, the British royal family arc, I'm calling it the royal family faction arc, deal with it, is a perfect representation of what Index is as a series to me. It's expansive. The world building is phenomenal. There is an absolutely excellent historical context to all of this, and it's just plain exciting to me. So to wrap up this segment about what I love about the world and the setting is that Academy City itself, alone Academy City, is a wonderfully interesting setting that just has so much potential and so many opportunities to explore so many different ideas. And it doesn't just stop at Academy City. There's a whole dang world, and Academy City fits in this world in a very strange way. To some people, they're a threat to faith around the world. And to other people, it's where they send their children so they can go develop a supernatural power. So now that I've talked a lot about why I find the world to be so interesting, and I honestly probably could go on even longer, but I want to talk about the power system and the ranking system next. This probably won't be as long. So I already mentioned that there were, I believe, 50 what they refer to as gemstones, were people that were naturally born espers. But then there was the Esper program created by Academy City that essentially gave an opportunity to millions of children to be able to develop their own supernatural ability. Now, the science behind how you form an ability is pretty interesting. So basically, it is formed from a personal reality. It's the idea that, I guess it's similar in nature to the idea of relative truth, where if you believe something to be true, then it is true. A character is able to develop a power at a very young age if they believe it to be true. This is honestly not really discussed much, and I think it's probably going to be the point of like a major reveal later down in the series. I haven't read the New Testament novels nor Genesis, so I can't really say for sure. But the idea of the personal reality creating a real life ability, I still find pretty interesting. Now, the powers can essentially be anything. You have Misaka Mikoto, who is an Electromaster. She uses electricity. You have Accelerator, who is extremely overpowered and can pretty much just change vectors, which creates pretty much endless possibilities. You have Kuriko Shirai, who can teleport. You have characters that can brainwash. You have characters that can change the buoyancy of something. If you can imagine it, it's probably someone's ability. I always felt like it was kind of similar in nature to My Hero Academia and its power system, sort of, that you can develop a power at a young age. But in my opinion, Toaru's powered system is much more interesting. The lore behind it and the ranking system, I think, is much more interesting. Speaking of the ranking system, you have characters that are ranked levels 0 through level 5, and then there's a potential level 6, which has never been reached, but has been deemed possible by researchers. So level 0 is basically you don't have an ability whatsoever. Level 1 is you have a completely useless ability. 2 is a little bit better. 3, 4, and then 5 you have the strongest espers. And there are only 7 level 5s in the entire city. The ranking system actually affects the culture of Academy City quite a bit. So because Accelerator, who can, change vectors or whatever, is the number 1 ranked Esper in all of Academy City, meaning he is the strongest Esper in all of Academy City, that deeply affected his reputation. There would be tons of people out in the streets who thought they were bad, thought they were tough, and so they would try to fight him, and then he would absolutely destroy them and make them beg for their lives. We've seen that level 5s are typically more popular, Shokuho Misaki, who is ranked 5, I believe, has her own faction at school. Misaka Mikoto is just a popular character that people may notice on the street. And other characters like the 4th ranked Mugino and the 1st ranked and 2nd ranked Accelerator and Dark Matter, or Kakine, I guess I should call him, all have pretty sketchy reputations because they're known for being a part of and working within the dark side of Academy City, which is a whole nother thing I could get into. But anyways, the point is, as you can imagine, how you're ranked can deeply affect how other people may view you in the city. And many people get defensive about how they are ranked. There's a whole organization, or honestly you could call them a gang, of level zeros known as Skill Out. Skill Out is essentially this large group of bums that are all level zeros and all pretty much hate espers and the system. And to briefly discuss a certain scientific railgun, I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but this does kind of tie in, and this is actually not in the manga, but it's in the anime, which I thought was really well done. But Saten, who is a level 0, initially feels distaste towards Mikoto before she's got to know her, because she knows that she's a level 5 and thinks that a level 5 could never associate with a level 0 like her. So I really only bring this up to kind of show you that there's an interesting culture around the ranking system. In terms of the action itself, one thing I have always loved about Toaru is how creative they get with the use of abilities. So Mikoto can use electricity, which sounds really generic. It sounds extremely generic. But Kazuma Kamashi, the author, in my opinion, makes this so much more interesting with how he makes Mikoto use her ability. So obviously she could just zap someone, which she does all the time, especially Toma and Kuriko. But she can also use her electricity to control iron found in the ground. So she can make like an iron whirlwind, or she can make like an iron weapon. She can also stick to walls because, you know, there's metal used to make buildings and stuff. And most notably, where her nickname comes from, Railgun, she can essentially fire a railgun using an arcade token. Another thing to note is how this can also affect other people's powers. So Shokuho Misaki, who is a level 5, who is ranked below her, is basically able to mind control, and her mind control is amplified through a TV remote that she uses. And because of the nature of Mikoto's ability, she has an electrical barrier around her. She is not affected by Shokuho's ability. So there's a lot of thought put into characters' abilities and how they react to another character's abilities. This is also used often for teamwork, of course, as well. And to talk a little bit more about the creativity of some other powers, Accelerator is interesting because he uses vectors to reflect anything that hits him. And this is also why his hair is white, I believe, is because he reflected the... I don't know the science behind it. I'm sorry. Some other notable things are Kuriko can teleport. One thing she did in Railgun, which I know I shouldn't be talking about Railgun, I should be talking about negatives, whatever, but she can teleport a glass pane into the pillar of a building, and she can cut it that way because it accesses the 11th dimension, which is this whole scientific concept that honestly I don't fully understand and I would have to research to know more about, and one day I will. But really my point is that I think Kazuma Kamachi and Index as a whole does a great job at getting generic abilities and making them more interesting through practical use. Now, all I've discussed so far is the science side of the power system. Here's where Index gets like insane and probably to some people's eyes kind of stupid, but then you have the magic side. The magic side is weird, but it's also really cool. On the magic side, a character can obtain power through different methods, and honestly, I don't really understand it as well. But my favorite example of a magic user in Index is without a doubt Aqua of the Back, aka William Orwell. So William Orwell is a saint who I believe you're born a saint. I'm not exactly sure, but he's a saint that had inherent potential, and he has this ability known as Divine Mother's Mercy. This is essentially like the removal of a human limiter, and it gives him like supernatural speed and strength. I believe the reason he had this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was because he bared a likeness to Mary from the Bible. But he also bears a likeness to the Archangel Gabriel, which gives him the affinity of water, which he can use, for fighting. This is where it gets interesting, in my opinion. So basically, with magic, you can create magical power by essentially bearing some sort of likeness to something either religious, historical, mythological, something like that. If you bear any sort of similarity to something like that, then you can thus create some sort of magic system out of it. I'm really not explaining it super well, but there are many cases of this within Index. And this doesn't just apply to a person's magical strength. It can also apply to spells and, more interestingly, weapons. Going back to the royal family arc, I think the Kurtana, which is a sword used by Carissa during the coup d'etat, is so freaking interesting. Talking about the sword actually gets me excited because it actually relates to my favorite thing I think I've ever learned in history class, which is King freaking Henry. So the Kurtana was originally in the United Kingdom. It was just a ceremonial sword, I believe, for crowning the king or queen or whoever. And King Henry is probably my favorite person in all of history, just because of how absurdly interesting this part of history is and how important it actually was for the Protestant church, I believe. And I'm talking about real life, by the way. I meant England specifically earlier, by the way, not exactly the United Kingdom. But anyways, basically, King Henry wanted to break free of the Roman Catholic Church, as the Roman Catholic Church was essentially governing the country. And I believe there's actually more to that. I believe King Henry also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure King Henry also wanted a way to divorce his wife so he could marry someone else. And just as a brief history lesson right here, but the reason for this was because back then, people didn't know that women could not choose the gender of their child when they gave birth. They genuinely thought that the woman decided what the gender of your child would be, right? And his wife did not give him a son, and he desperately wanted his son to be the next king of the country. So this was a part of why he wanted to create a separate church, which I believe it says the Anglican Church, however you say the word, but I think it's also the foundation of the Protestant Church. I'm not as knowledgeable as I should be about this. So essentially, he wanted to marry this woman that said she would give him a son. Spoiler alert, she did not give him a son. I'm still talking about real life, by the way. Now, I'm sure that wasn't the only reason that they wanted to break free of the control of the Roman Catholic Church, but it's all interesting nevertheless. It's honestly kind of like a soap opera. It's like a drama. I love it. Anyways, so back to the sword, the Kurtana. So we're back to the show now, right? I don't think the Kurtana, I don't know if that's a thing in real life, honestly. But it was a ceremonial sword, and he decided to break free from the control of, like I said, the Roman Catholic Church. Thus, he did by creating the Anglican Church. And with this new authority that he obtained as the new head of the country, basically, as a monarch, he developed a magical system within the sword that, if being used by someone with royal blood, This sword would give immense power to the ruler and also buffs the military or the knights of England if they are in England itself. Like, if they are physically in England, then the katana is extremely powerful and the knights are thus buffed from it. I might not have explained that perfectly, but this is legitimately one of the most interesting backstories for a weapon that I've ever seen in anything else in fiction. It legitimately relates to my favorite time in all of history to learn about. That is my favorite time in history to learn about in school. So to sum up how magic kind of ish works is that a weapon or spell or power, whatever, can obtain magic power through giving it meaning with historical context, religious context, or anything mythological, anything like that. This is legitimately one of the most unique power systems I have ever seen in all of fiction, and I don't know why people don't talk about it. When people talk about power systems, for some reason, the only thing anyone ever brings up is like Naruto, Hunter x Hunter, and like stands from JoJo's. I love Toaru's system so much because there are two sides to it. There's the science side, which is, I guess, more traditional for anime, but the magic side is legitimately connected to religion, history, and mythology. I really don't know why people don't talk about this. Anyways, honestly, you could have a very long discussion about the power system and all that stuff in this series, but I kind of need to move on because I've been recording for a long time. So let's move on to characters, the cast. I would say this is probably the biggest reason why I love the Toaru series so much. And Index has a plethora of great characters. I believe Kazuma Kamachi actually stated that they counted over 500 characters that existed in the Toaru series that had a name and I think a design, or at least a name or something like that, which is absolutely insane. Even if you hate the series, I do believe there's at least one character you could find that you really like. I mean, well, maybe not with bad anime adaptation, but I mean, whatever, right? So this is going to be kind of tough to talk about because there's so many characters, but I'm just going to go through a few of my favorite characters and why I love them so much. Keep in mind, I'm going to try to stick to Index mostly here. I'll talk more about Mikoto, Kuriko, Tsaten, and Railgun, and Kuriko's actually getting her own video, so that will come at some point. Okay, well, I'll say this, to get Toma out of the way, I have not read all of the light novels. I kind of don't feel like I have much to say about Toma because of that. When I made that tier list video on my main channel that got like 15 or 16,000 views at this point, which is weird because it's a bad video. I have a hard time describing why I like Toma. I don't love Toma, but I like him. But so many comments on that video said Toma was one of their favorite characters. Like they thought he was that they would put him top tier, right? And almost all of them said that he is a completely different character in the light novels compared to the anime. I haven't read enough of the light novels to say, but I will say my favorite Toma moment, which was cut from the anime, which I read during the Royal Family Faction arc, when he was on the airplane looking for the terrorist or whatever, he knocked out the pilot because the pilot was being like, he was being like cocky or he was being stupid or whatever. So he knocked him out like with a pipe or something. It was crazy. I was like, what? I don't remember this. And it's because they cut it out of the anime. No wonder I don't remember. I don't really have much to say about him. I also don't have much to say about Index. I will say I loved Index in the first arc. Index in the very first arc, that's peak Index, in my opinion. The character Index. Unfortunately, her character has devolved into kind of just begging for food 24/7. One thing I want to point out is about the characters. The cool thing about the way Index is structured is Index loves to change the protagonist of an arc. So there are multiple arcs where Accelerator is the protagonist. There's arcs where Hamazura is kind of the protagonist. There's an arc where Kuriko Shirai is the protagonist, dude. I freaking love that arc. The tree diagram remnant arc. I love that arc. It's one of my favorites because of it. That was the arc that I think solidified Kuriko as my favorite in the series. But I love huge casts that don't solely focus on the main character. This is one of the reasons I love Bleach, because even though Ichigo is one of my favorite characters of all time, he's actually, I think, my third favorite character of all time. Bleach focuses on a lot of characters. A lot of characters get to shine in Bleach, and that's definitely true for Index. Multiple different characters can be the protagonist. It really does focus on a lot of characters that you may not expect them to focus on. I was so shocked when Hamazura, this random dude from Skill Out that I talked about earlier, was confronted by Toma just out of the blue at the end of season 2, and comes back in season 3 essentially as a protagonist in some really good parts of the show. I really enjoyed his relationship during the World War III arc with Takitsubo, and I really enjoyed him in the Battle Royale arc too. It was pretty unexpected, and I kind of like when the author gives a spotlight to a character you're not expecting. No one expected Otto from ReZero, a character that would ever stick around, and now Otto is like a part of the main cast, and like everyone loves him. I love Otto. But I think Index truly starts to set itself apart when they introduce Accelerator as a protagonist in the, I think it's called the 3 Stories arc, I think. So in the Sisters arc, Accelerator is introduced as this person who is the number 1 ranked Esper who is who's slaughtering these clones of Misaka Mikoto. And he's just looks like such a comic villain. He's really over the top, psychotic, seems just blatantly bad. And you wonder, why on earth did the show why did they introduce the top ranked dude in the city and then have him lose to Toma halfway through the first season? You know why they did it? They did it because the Accelerator was the second protagonist in disguise. And Accelerator comes back in the 3 Stories arc. I hope that's the name of the arc, because I'm going to keep calling it that. And you get more context to his character. It's wonderful. And he gets this whole redemption arc. The rest of his character after that is just one big redemption. And it all leads to this big climax of his self-perspective, confronting himself as this villain of sorts that he's convinced himself to be. And it's so well done. Accelerator is such a wonderfully developed character. He's introduced as being this retarded villain that's just so blatantly comically evil, and he's entirely recontextualized to be so much different than what you thought before. There's so much more depth. I would say Accelerator is one of my favorite anti-heroes, and probably one of the best examples of an anti-hero in fiction. You learn that he was kind of... Technically, I'm talking about Railgun here, but this is important for Index as well. But you learn that he was kind of manipulated into taking part in this level 6 shift project, which, if you don't know, it's basically they got Misaka Mikoto, they cloned her 20,000 times, and they used her for this program to essentially elevate Accelerator, the number 1 ranked Esper, into becoming the first ever level 6, making him impossible to beat. This was all orchestrated by the higher-ups in the governing board of Academy City. Anyways, you learned that he was manipulated into doing this, and as he was pressured into doing this, and he was someone that was extremely lonely throughout his life because of his ability. Everyone kind of thought he was a freak, which we've seen that in fiction before. But because of that loneliness, it drove him to continue participating in that project, and he slowly, maybe not slowly, he quickly kind of turned completely psychopathic as he was slaughtering these clones, which he had not really viewed as the objects that he was told they were. He kind of really viewed them as other humans. So after being forced to kill half of the 20,000, over 10,000, he killed over 10,000 clones and was psychologically traumatized because of this, and had convinced himself that he was just evil, that he just had to be evil. That's all he really could be. And after losing in his confrontation to Toma, who was a level 0, which was absolutely embarrassing to him, there was no way he should have lost that. He knew that, the governing board knew that, the viewer knew that. It was a complete humiliation, and it actually even affected his reputation in real life. I think people like trashed his apartment or wherever he lived. And so now, even though he's still the first ranked and he's still extremely powerful, nobody respects him. He's even more alone than he was before, but now he carries all of this psychological trauma. And then he finally bumps into Last Order, which is, I don't know how to, it's basically the most important Misaka clone, if you want to call her that. I think she was the last developed Misaka clone, I guess. I honestly don't fully remember what Last Order exactly was. I'm sorry. But he develops a relationship with Last Order, and he sets himself on this path of redemption, and it's so well done. It is so well done. He has found someone that genuinely cares about him, and he has found someone that he also genuinely cares about. He now feels this sense of responsibility to take care of and protect this girl that represents, I guess in a way, all of his sins. And though he has set himself on this path, he still has his own inner demons that he has to confront. I hate that term, by the way, inner demons. I don't know why I don't like that term. I just don't like it. But he still deep down believes himself to be irredeemable. And that doesn't really change until Index 3, where he's confronted by Toma for a second time and essentially learns that he doesn't need to continue playing himself up as this villain that's going to bear all the sins that he's committed. I really need to read World War III to better understand that sort of resolution. So that was all just Accelerator. There are plenty of other characters that I really, really love. I'll go over a few of them. I won't talk about them nearly as in depth, but I already talked about Carissa. I love Carissa. I love Kanzaki, who is just this absurdly cool saint. I believe she's called the Sword Saint, and Kanzaki actually has my favorite character design in all of anime. I just think her design is so attractive, unique, and recognizable. Maybe it's weird in context to the rest of the series, but I don't care. I just love her design so much. I also liked Kanzaki's sort of internal development that she experienced around the Aqua of the Back arc, which I want to say was volume 16. She was originally part of the Amakusa Church, but had to abandon them because she felt... I actually find this interesting. She felt this sort of pity for the rest of the church because no one in the church was nearly as strong as her. And I believe she felt like she was kind of holding them back in a way, or I guess maybe she felt it was unfair. And so that's why she ended up joining the Necessarius. And even though she felt that way, she kind of looks back at herself as, I guess I would say, kind of arrogant. She recognized that she wasn't giving them the respect that the Amakusa Church really deserved. She confronted her own sort of, I guess, condescending nature, if you want to call it that. You also have Aqua of the Back, which I've already talked about a bit, but Aqua of the Back is the perfect representation of actions speak louder than words, and I find him to be a very admirable character. I already talked a little bit about Hamzura, who was such a turnaround character that I never expected to be as enjoyable as he was. I really enjoyed his relationship with Taketsubo. Itsuwa is a character I feel like a lot of people, including myself, enjoy. Itsuwa is just the purest, sweetest, most loyal girl ever. The way she's introduced as having a crush on Toma, so she, I guess, portrays that by giving him like warm towels, which is so cute. It's like she's just trying hard in her own way. I also love her extreme like self-deprecation. Like she calls herself I think she calls herself a slut a few times. It's pretty funny. She's a very comedic character too. Style, I really like Style. I love his design. The barcode in his face is kind of funny. I don't have too much deep to say about him, but I do think he fills his role well as this sort of reliable and strong magic user. Also, it's pretty crazy that he's like only 14. Looks like a grown man. You have Laura Stewart, who I know something's up with her in New Testament. I haven't read New Testament yet. I do plan to. But I love Laura Stewart because she is kind of a utilitarian of sorts. Laura Stewart is entirely okay with sacrificing someone if it means fulfilling her objective. So on the airplane, when there was a terrorist on board, she said she was entirely fine with sacrificing everyone else on that plane as long as Index was safe. Not even Toma. Not even Toma. That's what's interesting. Only Index. She also just has this really sort of, how would I describe it? I don't know. She's got this really funny personality I really enjoy. I always remember the scene in Index 3 where a truck is coming by and like she needs a ride back to the city or whatever, and so she tries to seduce the truck driver as he's driving by, you know, like pulling up her dress a little bit, showing her leg, and then the truck just like makes the harshest U-turn I've ever seen in my life. Let's see. I'd also like to talk about Fiamma of the Right, but I want to read World War III before I really talk about him. So yeah, I'm gonna have to skip him for now. I also don't have much to say about Aleister Crowley. I know a lot of people really love him, but I just frankly don't know much about him. I think he's extremely interesting. I really want to know his backstory. I guess a less important random character that I really like is Lesser. Lesser is just really funny. I want to point out Oriana. One thing I like about Oriana is just I love how Index will reuse characters from past arcs that you may have forgotten about. I like how she returned in Index 3 to help Toma during the Royal Family arc. Tsuchi Mikado is a character I really did not like at first. I started to really like him around the Daihase arc in Season 2. He's one of those characters that you really think is just all comedic relief until you see him actually get serious. Then it kind of shows you that he does legitimately care more than you might believe. That he doesn't just view everything happening around him as a game. Index is a bit different from Railgun because Index just has an absurd amount of characters that all fill this role that's important in the world as a whole, I guess I should say, or that's important in the grand scheme of things. But Railgun is a bit more, I guess, individualistic. It focuses heavily on the same few characters, whereas I feel like Index is the series that it kind of reminds me of Attack on Titan in a way. Attack on Titan before the final season was a show that didn't per se focus on individual characters as much as it did events going on in the world and the cast's reaction to those events. I guess to put it another way, it feels as if the events happening are more important than what the individual characters are individually going through. I kind of want to say it's more collectivist, whereas Railgun is more individualistic. Some people may vehemently disagree with me on that. I'd be happy to hear what other people think. But my point really was that Index may not go into characters as deep as like Railgun does from like a personal standpoint, but Index has so many different characters that are all so fun and all represent a different ideology or a different mindset, opinion, whatever it may be. It's like they're all these puzzle pieces that kind of fit together, adding to one conclusion. Before I move on from the character part, I also want to point out Index's absolutely insane use of organizations. Let me just list off some of them. There's a lot. Okay, so there's Item, which is my personal favorite. Scavenger, Necessarius, Group, Member, School, the Kihara family, Block, Study, but I think that's technically exclusive to Railgun. Anti-skill, Skill Out, Big Spider, the Amakusa Church I already talked about. There's a bunch of different churches, a bunch of different families. There's just so many. God's Right Seat. I have to say, even though maybe it's a little silly how many there are, but it's still really cool. It adds so much to the world. Specifically in the Battle Royale arc, all of them kind of clash together, and it's really interesting. I really like the Battle Royale arc, specifically the light novel, because I actually read that one. The anime adaptation for that was garbage. It was really bad. Oh, also there's Judgment. I don't know why I forgot Judgment. So I guess that's all I have to say for the characters now. Honestly, I could talk a lot more about the characters when I make the Railgun video, whenever I make that. But my main point was that I love how huge Index's cast is. I love how each character fills their role within the world, the importance of everyone during each arc, and it feels kind of like a collectivist approach that I really like. It feels like it's more than just a single character and his journey like we've seen a million times. It really is simulating something so much bigger than your average story. So now I think I want to move on to discussing a little bit of just some of my favorite moments from the different arcs. I've discussed a lot about the world and the characters, but I want to talk a little bit about, the actual story and structure. So arcs are a bit shorter than some other series maybe. So an arc in Index will usually be around 3 to 5-ish episodes. The longest is World War III, which was, I think it was 8, and it was 8 or 9, and it really should have been longer, probably. Considering Royal Family Faction arc or whatever only had 5 episodes when it was 2 books. I think World War III deserved more time. But nevertheless, I guess some of my opinions on each arc. So the Index arc, I didn't super love it when I originally watched it, but I enjoyed a lot more in hindsight. I think the pacing is pretty nice. I really enjoy Index as a character. I think Index actually has a pretty good backstory that she doesn't really get a ton of credit for. I do love the struggles of Style and Kanzaki to entrust Index to Toma. Now, Toma does kind of represent a more overly optimistic mindset than I kind of like. Honestly, I'm kind of tired of that sort of mindset of, I have to get the best possible ending in every single scenario ever. I'm not a huge fan of, Toma kind of comes off as a white knight in the first arc, which I'm not a big fan of. I do definitely think that changes down the line for sure. One thing I do love about Toma is he's not afraid to just knock out anyone. This man punches women like nothing. Like that's gender equality. Moving on, I'm actually just looking at the wiki, the arcs listed. Deep Blood. Deep Blood does not need to exist. Dude, if they ever do anything with Isa in the future, I'll be shocked. Watch Isa be a part of some gigantic scheme at the end or something. But dude, they cut Deep Blood arc from the manga, so I think that tells you how important it is. I will say I do like the atmosphere of that arc, and I used to hate the villain of that arc because I just thought he was stupid, but he actually, interestingly enough, does represent what could have happened to Toma had he gone down another path. The Sisters arc, even though the Railgun version of the Sisters arc is just better, I still love the Sisters arc. I love the idea of the Sister Clone project, the Level 6 Shift project. It's just conceptually really interesting, and it's really ambitious. And that's the type of sci-fi stuff I absolutely love. I think the Sisters arc is a perfect representation of what Index is as a series. Now, Jared, if you're for some reason watching it, I get it. You don't like the fight between Toma and Accelerator because you think Accelerator should have just killed Toma instantly. I don't care. That does not affect my enjoyment of the arc in particular. if for some reason anyone else is watching this, I don't know why you would watch this, but Jared is my in real life friend who roasts the mess out of me for liking Index. It's weird because he talks about Index more than I do. I don't even talk about Index. I don't even bring it up. He just brings it up to roast me. It's like, whatever. Anyways, moving on. Angel Fall. Angel Fall is a weird arc, and apparently the manga skipped it. I didn't realize that. It's kind of weird. It's kind of goofy at times, but I love the idea of them trying to pull an angel out of heaven or something. And Sasha was also there. I just think Sasha's kind of cool, honestly. I don't really have much to say about Angel Fall. It's not a super important arc, but I don't know. I'd have to watch it again. It's been a while. 3 Stories arc is really good. Now, the Ed Zolli stuff is not as interesting as the Accelerator stuff, but this 3 Stories arc is where Index really starts to set itself apart by focusing heavily on Accelerator. It's kind of the precursor to Index, kind of having multiple protagonists, which I really, really like in a story. Kazakiri Hyoka arc. I don't like Kazakiri Hyoka as a character. I think she's boring. She has grown on me over time, though conceptually this arc is pretty cool. So the concept of aim dispersion is this scientifically proven fact that all espers emit this thing called aim into this aim dispersion field, and all this aim floating around or whatever conceptualized into physical form with Kazakiri Hyoka. I just think that's conceptually really cool. I just said the word conceptually like 3 times. I don't care. So even though she's kind of a boring character, the arc itself is not bad, and I really enjoyed it. I also hated Sherry Cromwell from this arc at first, but she's grown on me a good bit. She's not really that bad. Then we're at season 2, the Ursula rescue arc. It's fine. It introduced the Amakusa Church, whom I really like. Ursula herself is a boring character, but there was kind of this thing Index does. It's just like weird, kind of crazy violence at times. And I think there was this scene where all the sisters like were being controlled or something by Index's song, and they just like stabbed their ears or something crazy. The tree diagram arc, I freaking love the tree diagram arc. I love that they made Kuriko the main character, and her fight with Musujime, teleporter, who's basically just a better teleporter, but has like trauma because she teleported into a building or whatever it was. That I loved that confrontation. I loved that fight. I thought it was very enjoyable. Also, I like how it deals with it's the after effects of, I believe, the first arc. In the first arc, it concludes with Index going crazy because Toma's right hand destroyed the thing, whatever. And then it set off this like defense system within her, and something happened, and they basically ended up destroying the tree diagram thingy. It was basically this sort of supercomputer used for like a lot of information and stuff by the higher ups. It also had to do with like weather. With the tree diagram, they were able to perfectly predict the weather, and when it was destroyed, they could no longer do that. I believe it was used for more than just that, though. Also, one thing I had not realized that I had forgotten was when I was reading, I didn't realize that Musujime had access to the windowless building, which is where Aleister Crowley is, which is pretty interesting. The Daihase arc is pretty good. I mean, I enjoyed it in Index. I definitely like it more in Railgun. I do enjoy Oriana's antagonist, and it was kind of just another plot of, someone trying to destroy Academy City. I remember it still being a pretty fun arc. It changed my opinion of Tsuchi Mikado, and I remember Index wearing the cheerleader outfit, which was very cute. The Ice Ship arc is boring. I don't like the Ice Ship arc, but I think that was the first time they went to another country, right? Italy? Yeah. Academy City Invasion arc that's metal. That's metal. That's a metal arc. Man, I enjoyed that. There was a lot of Accelerator in that arc as well. Dude, what happens in that arc is everyone in the city, except for a select few, get knocked out. just straight up because Vento invades or whatever. And so a large portion of the city gets knocked out, and Kazakiri freaking Hyoka is like turning into an angel. I gotta rewatch that arc or read it or something. And then there's Skill Out Uprising, which I don't have much to say about. It's there. It's cool. Document of Constantine is probably the best adaptation from Index 3. And there's some pretty interesting ideas in it, although I would say it's probably the one that bored me the most in Index 3, but it's still pretty interesting, the idea that I believe the Pope can use the Document of Constantine to control followers of the faith. It's kind of scary, isn't it? Also, that's where Mikoto ends up learning that Toma has amnesia. Battle Royale arc is crazy. Battle Royale arc is so cool. It's just nonstop chaos. And then it ends with Accelerator fighting Kakine, which is a really cool moment, seeing number 1 and number 2 fight. And Accelerator kind of has a bit of a breakdown. Also, I believe this is where Hamazura in the anime became a protagonist of sorts, and seeing his interactions with Item was pretty dang fun. Also, I love Item, by the way. I love all of the characters in Item. I think all 4 of them are great. 5 if you want to consider Hamazura. The Aqua of the Back arc was a very interesting one. It sucks that Index 3 had such a bad adaptation because the content is so good. The content is where Index is just at its best, in my opinion. It's such a great build-up up to World War III. The Aqua of the Back arc was really solid. That's where Kanzaki got some character development. Amaka's Church was actually able to stand up against Aqua of the Back, which is really interesting to watch. And Aqua of the Back, I've already talked about him. He's a really cool actions speak louder than the words character. I talked a lot about British Royal Family arc. Honestly, it's probably one of my favorites in the series. I think it's one of, if not the most impressive arc from Old Testament outside of World War III, because I've not read World War III. I honestly have almost nothing to say about the Dragon arc, but because for some reason it has completely evaded me as to what happened in that arc. I just remember Accelerator's confrontation with Iwas, or Awas, however you say his name, and I remember just being so interested, like, who is this guy? Finally, you have World War III, which is I have to read this arc. I have to read it because I know the anime probably didn't do it justice. I don't really have much to say right now, but maybe I'll make a video about it. I will say I deeply admired just how ambitious that arc was. I love the build up to that arc. I think it was so well done. It really feels like Kazuma Kamachi was really thinking far ahead, probably around the Document of Constantine. No, I'd say the Academy City Invasion arc. I think that's when he started to really start focusing on the future of the series, and it's pretty impressive and it's pretty ambitious, and I really admire that. I always say I prefer ambition and creativity over technical superiority, and I think that's what I love about Index. I think Index is just such an ambitious series. Yes, at times it's hit or miss. It does definitely miss the mark at times, but it's just still a series that fascinates me so much. Besides this, I'm pretty much almost done here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the music. I love the music. It's one of my favorite soundtracks. I love all the openings. The cool thing about the music is, and I said this in my attempting to make a Toaru opening video, but I think the reason that it's electronic rock is because it ties into the setting. Academy City is very technologically advanced. I think you can understand why the soundtrack typically leans electronic rock to push that idea of, technology and science. So I guess I'm wrapping everything up here. I said a lot. Index is a very flawed series. There are many problems with it. I understand people's problems with it. I understand if you think it's boring, because yes, I do think Index has a very rough start. And I mean, 2 arcs from the first season were unimportant enough to the point where they were literally cut from the manga adaptation of the series. And I know it's a hard series to get into. That's why a lot of people end up going Railgun only, or, they just think Railgun is far superior to Index. But people need to give Index credit, I think. Index has created this absurdly fascinating world, such a phenomenal setting, so many conceptually cool ideas that go entirely unappreciated. I'm not gonna lie, it really grinds my gears when I see people just making really petty passing insults about the series who don't know anything about the series. It sucks. I'm not trying to be condescending, but it's just when you talk about this show being garbage when you don't even know anything about it, it just kind of hurts because there's so much more to the series that it feels like no one is acknowledging. And you don't even have to read the light novels to get a grasp of it. The light novels help, yes. The anime adaptation skipped out so much, it cut out so much good stuff, I understand. But that doesn't entirely take away from some of the great things that a certain magical index does. It is just something I've gotten so invested in. It's something that I've started to just care so much about. It's the only series I have ever considered reading the light novels for. I hate reading. I hate reading light novels. Not light novels specifically. I hate reading. I don't like it anymore. There was a time in my life when I enjoyed it more. I'm not a fan of reading novels. I can read manga, but reading novels is just so hard for me, and Index is one of the only series that ever makes me want to do it. When I look at this series, I see it for its ambition, its really cool ideas, its fun characters, its interesting themes, its political nature, its contrast between science and religion, science and magic, whatever you want to refer to it as. I see it for its in-depth power system. I know there's a lot of negatives. There's a lot of trashy fan service, like I already talked about the anime adaptation. There are a lot of things, and yes, it is a very tough series to get into, but I think if you just give it a shot, then maybe watch more than you're comfortable with. Get into the Toaru universe as a whole, because it's not just Index. In my opinion, if Index was the only thing that existed, I probably really wouldn't care this much about the series, because it's really everything in the Toaru series added up to its whole. I think it's the idea that I think it's greater than the sum of its parts. There's a lot to uncover. There's a lot of characters to learn about. There's a lot of lore to learn about. There's a lot of history even to learn about. It's a series that I feel like I've gotten so much value out of. And like I said, it's all of Toaru together. Index is what ties everything together, and I deeply appreciate that. I will never say that it's the best thing to ever be created. I'm not going to say you're stupid for not liking it. I'm not going to say any of this stuff. I'm not going to say you have bad taste for not liking it. Though, if you watch Echidna, the ReZero YouTuber, he thinks you have bad taste if you like it. I think he needs to swallow a shard of glass. I'm kidding. Echidna makes really good videos. I like him. It's always weird to me that for some reason petty passing comments usually bother me more than someone like telling me why they don't like something or why they think it's bad. Because then at least I have something I can refute. But all in all, in a way, I kind of like that Index is just not as popular. I do kind of blame JC's staff for that. JC's staff has not really done a great job with Index, even though they've done a phenomenal job with Railgun. I do often find myself enjoying things more that are more niche or controversial. I mean, my favorite shonen is Bleach, which would probably get me beaten up in a back alley. For some reason, people have no respect for Bleach and always trash on it so hard. I mean, look at Moist Critical's tier list. He went hard on Bleach. Oh my goodness. I gotta make a video about Bleach. Bleach is the most underappreciated, disrespected shonen to ever exist. I'm gonna make a video on it one day. I think I'll probably read the manga first. Anyways, back to the Index. In a way, for us that do see the good things in Index, it's kind of like we're in our own little fan club. I do think being niche is a lot more fun than being mainstream. You could be like My Hero Academia's garbage fan base. I mean, I'm glad Toaru is not on the same level of popularity as My Hero, that's for sure. But at the same time, it does hurt to see people disrespect this thing that I have personally just gotten so much value and so much enjoyment out of. I'm not saying you can't roast Index. You can feel free to roast Index. There's plenty of things worthy of roasting. all I really wanted to do with this video was just get everything off my chest about why I love it, because I don't really know many people that also love it. It's a very obscure series, and I think it's one that deserves more respect. So yeah, I guess that's going to be the end of the video. Hopefully I didn't leave out anything too important. If you have any questions or want me to talk more about something, I'd be glad to do so. Feel free to ask me anything in the comments, and I will be making a railgun video, absolutely. There is even more I have to discuss there. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you have a nice day, night, week, month, year, decade, life.